Welcome to the Italian-American Museum of Washington, D.C. My name is Francesco Isgro, and I'm the president of this museum. We are here today to celebrate a significant occasion, the official launch of Anthony Desantis' book, Stowaway in First Class, a true story of an unforgettable quest to come to America. We are particularly honored because our museum provides the perfect backdrop for a story that resonates so deeply with our core mission, which is to collect, display, and preserve artifacts, as well as oral histories that portray the lives, struggles, and achievements of Italian immigrants, and to educate the public about Italians and Italian Americans. Ciro De Falco is the chairman of the board of our Italian American Museum, an immigrant himself. He came to America alone at the age of 13. A true success story. He eventually rose to the highest ranks of federal government and international organizations. His work at the Treasury Department led him to missions around the world, including in Rome, in Brazil. His work with international organizations culminated with his appointment as the Chief Operating Officer of the International Development Bank. We are fortunate to have him as our chairman. Please welcome Ciro De Falco.
Well, Francesco, thank you very much for those kind words. You forgot to say that I walked on water. Before I make the usual introduction to the author, here, his name is Anthony Desantis, and if you don't mind, I call you Tony, as well as his wife, Judy, who's over there. Welcome to the museum, and I want to take this occasion, we'll have other occasions to do so, but I want to express our gratitude for your strong support to this museum. As you know, we are a nonprofit organization. We don't charge. We just have people like yourselves who help us out. And so we are very, very thankful. Now, Tony and Judy, believe it or not, they live in Florida. I think there's some people sitting in the audience who want to be Floridian. They spend a lot of time, well, I'll tell you later about all the time they spend in Florida. He visited the museum for the first time about 2 years ago, as he was taking his Italian relatives around Washington, D.C. And so I had the pleasure and the fortune, I should say, to give them the guide to the Italian-speaking group, and that's when we first met, when we came to the museum for the first time. During the course of the museum, as we were talking about immigration, which, as Francesco indicated, is sort of the centerpiece of the museum, to tell the story of the Italian-American contribution to American society, Tony mentioned that his father had come over as a stowaway. For some of you may not know what is a stowaway. A stowaway is somebody who gets on a ship, or used to get on a ship, with the help of the crew, I suppose, of somebody, either, there's a combination. You'll have to read the book to get the story, okay? But the stowaway is what we call these days illegal immigrants, okay? The story is more complicated than that, but I'm not going to tell you, and I don't know how much Tony is going to tell you, but it's a fascinating story. It's in the book. So Tony said, I have this story, and I really should write it down. Should I? Yeah, that's a great idea. I'll make a great story, perhaps make a great movie. Perhaps it will. I read the book, and it reads extremely well. It reads like a thriller, and at the end of you'll have an opportunity to get a copy of the book. Tony will sign it at the end of the presentation. So let me tell you a little bit about Tony. First of all, I should tell you he wrote the book in 2 years. That was a fantastic job. You did it very quickly. He is a retired pilot. He's the guy who comes on there and says, "Yeah, we're about to land." Hopefully, exactly. But he also had a second career, simultaneously in post-retirement from being a pilot. He was a financial advisor to a group of former pilots. He and a group of colleagues of his, they put this organization together. He's no longer doing that. He's fully retired. Now, he, first generation, his father was a stowaway. He was a very good student, so he made it to the U.S. Air Force Academy. He graduated with honors and went on to serve his country as a military pilot for 8 years. Upon leaving active duty with the Air Force, he received a fellowship from the Columbia Graduate School of Business and earned an MBA degree. He subsequently flew as a pilot for American Airlines for 29 years, serving as a captain for 18 years, retiring as an international capital, flying the Boeing 767. For those of us who go to Europe, United still flies a few of those. They're mainly 777, but they still have some 767. Yeah. He was also given the Wright brothers. You all know who the Wright brothers were. Yeah. The Wright Brothers Master Award from the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. I already mentioned that he had a second career as a financial advisor. He was very successful at it. And he spent a lot of time after retirement doing volunteer work. He volunteered, do a lot of volunteer work with the Civil Air Patrol, training young cadets in aviation discipline, as well as other work. Francesco already said what the book is about. As I said, he's been working on the book for a couple of years. He's presenting for the first time to an audience, and we are very pleased, of course, that he's chosen the Italian-American Museum of D.C. Now, all I could say about the book is the following. The only thing we need to know is the following. He is the son of the guy who is the main character. Well, he's one of the main characters in the book. And as I said, it's a good book. I'm not sure you're going to get the whole story to that, because if it's a thriller, he can't give away the plot. It is a tribute, I should say, to Tony, that he took what on its face were a series of unusual events. I won't tell you what they were, and managed to capture all of the emotions of this trip that involved all the uncertainties, the anxieties, the courage, and yes, the fears of making such a trip. And by the way, this was not an unusual way to come to America in the early 1920s, because up until the end of the 1890s, until early 20, I would say 24, the border was pretty much open. If you went through Ellis Island, then you made it through, you came to America. But after that, you had to find other ways. So I won't say any more. I will turn the floor over to Tony, who will tell us all he wants to share with us. Probably not the whole story, but you'll have to read the book. Okay, here's Tony Desantis.
This is an amazing thing. I mean, 2 years ago when we were here, I had no idea we'd be back this soon, because I hadn't even started reading the book. And these guys they keep saying that they're very glad that I chose to launch my book here officially here. Well, I didn't choose that. They invited me to do that. So I would have chosen it anyway, but I don't get to choose. They invited me. So it's an honor that these guys and the board and Liz and everybody has invited me to be part of this organization and to present today. So, and I'm very thankful for all of you that have come today to share with me this big event. Okay, thank you very, very much. So I do have some written notes, or else I would not remember anything here. So, okay. I couldn't think of a better place to be able to launch a book about what we're going to talk about today than this place. We went through it yesterday again for the second time, and I learned so much about the history and the contributions of Italian Americans to this city and to the culture of our great country. And I couldn't think of a better place to do it. And I'm hoping that at least there's one more Italian American that can add a little bit to that history, and that's my father and his story. So I'll try to make this short, and it will be short. But and I'm not going to tell you the story, but I want to tell you a little bit about how it came to be. So I'm going to start out the same way that I start out in the book. And I know many of you speak Italian here in this room. Okay, so please be kind, because I don't speak very well. So I'm going to read something to start. It's an old Italian proverb. And I'm going to try to say it in Italian. Chi lascia la strada vecchia per la nuova sa quel che lascia, ma non sa quel che trova. It means he who leaves the old way for the new knows what he leaves, but doesn't know what he will find. And that is the story of my father's journey. And that is the theme of this book, okay? So if you keep that in mind, you kind of have a feel for what this is all going to be about. He knew nothing, okay? I'm known as Tony to my family and friends, and I grew up in the Italian section of a very ethnic town outside of Boston. Most of my neighbors were immigrant families, and most of my friends were all first or second generation Italian Americans like me, okay? I grew up surrounded by the food, the culture, the values of my parents and grandparents, whom we lived with. Although we struggled financially, mine was a tremendous childhood, a wonderful childhood. My family instilled in me a strong work ethic and great pride that I was an American, even though we came from an Italian family. However, my Italian roots were strengthened by my father's stories that he would tell me about the time before he became an American. And they were cemented back in 1960 when they took me over to Italy, and I got to live with my Italian family for 2 months when I was 12 years old. And when I came back, I had an appreciation for Italy and my Italian family that you wouldn't believe. So, and that's always been that way. So let me...
From originally?
What's that?
Your family. Where in Italy are they from?
Arce, it was a province of Frosinone, about 60 miles south of Rome. Yeah, so I'll get to that too. But let me add some background how this book came about, because you need to know a little bit of that. A little over 3 years ago, in February of, in fact, it was February 28th, 2022, I was flying my single-engine airplane alone, which I had done many, many times, having been a pilot for all those years, preparing for a flight down to the Keys with my wife, Judy. We were going to go visit friends in the Keys. So everything was great. Life was good. I was in great health. I was in great shape. I had no, medical problems that could foresee what was going to happen. I was leading a blessed, happy life as a retired pilot, a former military pilot, and with over 53 years of flying time and 15,000 hours of time in the air. And the next day, March 1, I almost died of a stroke. The doctors and my family didn't know whether I would make it. And they told my wife, even if he did make it, they didn't know what kind of life I would lead. So I finally awoke from the intubation after 3 days, and I had no idea where I was. I looked at my wife and said, "What happened? Did I crash?" And she assured me, "No, you didn't crash." And she told me what had happened. But so for the next 10 days in the ICU, and then 17 days later, 17 more days in a rehab center in Stuart, Florida, I tried to get my life back. I couldn't walk. I could barely talk. Could hardly eat. It was a tough time. I mean, once I was back home and I could do some things, I didn't know what I was going to do. I began to ask God why He had left me here. I knew there was a purpose, why God had spared me. Why am I still here? And then I began to realize one of the purposes was that God left me here was to write this story of my father that I had been wanting to write for so many years. I just had put it off. And so here was my chance to write his story. So rather than try to explain what happened next, I'm going to read directly from the book, from the prologue, which will give you an idea of what's to come. So I'm going to read directly from the book. So if you do buy the book or get the book, you know, a lot of this will be familiar. On March 5th, 1929, at 27 years old, my father faced a life-altering choice, the consequences of which would echo through generations. Had he known all the facts at the time, he would not have made the choice he did. He began a journey that would change his family's entire future. I heard the story countless times growing up and often shared the condensed version with my family and friends. Each time I told it, I got the same response. You have got to write that story. It would make a great movie. The problem was simply that I was not a writer, like some of the people in this room, but that I had a family, 2 successful careers, and a busy life. While I always wanted to, I just never made the time. Like many of us with good intentions, life just got in the way. Then I arrived at a point in my life where time was no longer a valid excuse. Fortunately, one year, while he was visiting, I did take the time to sit him down in front of a video camera and record the story in his own words. I then accompanied him on a trip to Paris to visit the woman he'd left behind. Then for 37 more years, I did nothing about it. I would retell his story over and over again, but I didn't write a word of it. After a medical incident that almost ended my life, I realized the story of my father's incredible journey would have ended as well. The digital copy of the VCR tape I had made would be forgotten in the junk heap of files that I would have left behind. Perhaps my wife, my children, and my sister had heard enough of the story to carry it on, but many of the details would be lost forever. It's time to write it down at last. The following story is true. The timeline and sequence of events as they occurred are real. My father could recall the story with amazing clarity. Although he was unable to fully verbalize what he experienced in vivid detail, his expressions told a much deeper story, one that I was fortunate enough to interpret over the years that I spent listening to him. Each time I imagined what he was thinking when he could not remember by observing the passion in his voice and seeing the emotion in his face. I would ask him questions to bring out those feelings whenever I could. I succeeded in drawing out many of them. When I was not successful, I would paint the scene in my mind based on those facial expressions and the inflection in his voice as he described it to me. I attempted to fill the gaps whenever I could. In writing his story, I have tried to capture those emotions, those expressions, and tell it in the way he would want it to be told. The book before you is a result of God's gift to me of a restored life. He graciously granted me another chance, the time to research the full story, and most importantly, the vision to write it. Whether or not it makes for a good movie is for others to decide. My intent is to present a heartfelt and accurate account of the events that took place in my father's life 100 years ago. And not only so my grandchildren can learn and appreciate the important lessons passed on to them from their courageous great-grandfather, but so the children and grandchildren of immigrants everywhere will find strength and encouragement from his story of coming to America with nothing and creating a wonderful life for himself and his family. So that's the prologue, okay? And you can read that on your own when you get the book, if you do. Now, you may be wondering how Ciro and Francesco came to know about me. Well, they already told you, so I won't expand on that too much. But after the stroke, about a year after the stroke, I began writing the story, and my cousins came from Italy to check on me, 9 of them, and they ranged in age. These were from my family, my father's family, so they were direct descendants from his line. They ranged in age from 80 to 16, 3 generations of Italian family. As a surprise to them, Judy and I took them on a 3-day trip to Washington, D.C., so they could see the sights of this beautiful city that they had seen many times on TV and movies and books and magazines. I mean, who hasn't seen these beautiful sights? Well, as they boarded the private plane we had chartered, they had no idea where we were going. We didn't tell them where we were going. We just told them what to pack and that we're going on a ride. We're going to go to a special place. They had no idea we were going to Washington. The next 3 days were an experience for them they will never forget. Our first stop on our tour, arranged by Alyssa at Ciao DC, thank you so much, was the museum. And my cousins were so excited to see this place and to learn about the significant Italian influence surrounding our nation's capital. And it just blew them away. Ciro gave us a tour of the museum, and we became instant friends and supporters. Now here we are again. Who would have known? When I finished the book about 18 months later, I sent Ciro a digital copy of the book and told him, well, if you like it, would you write a review, for me that I can include in the book on my website or whatever. And I didn't know, if he was going to like it, but I wanted to get something in the book before it actually came out in printed edition on Amazon. He sent me a very positive and powerful review that I have in the book on my website. It's on the back of the hardcover edition, on the inside of the so it's been very, very integral for me. He has given me so much encouragement as a new author, and his review has encouraged so many others to buy and read the book. Since it was released on March 12th, it has been an Amazon bestseller. That still astounds me, in several categories, including historical Italy biographies. And it's also been ranked as the #1 hot new release. So it's been a very, very exciting time for me. Now, let me tell you about the title. As you can see from the cover, it shows a large ship with an anchor chain. It's sunset. Down at the bottom, you may have noticed a man climbing the anchor chain. You see that? Some people miss that. Okay. Yes, that is my terrified father who couldn't swim. The ordeal and what led up to it is explained thoroughly in Chapter 4. I won't reveal any spoilers for those of you that have yet to read the book, other than to say it does suggest that he was forced to climb the anchor chain in order to get on the ship, and they were attempting to sneak him on board as a stowaway, just as the title suggests. Yeah. Now, one other picture here I want to show. Here is a picture of the actual ship, the SS Paris, on its maiden voyage to New York in 1921. This is the anchor chain. It wasn't just a small little, trawler. It was a big ocean liner. So that's visible there. Okay, but what is first class? What does that got to do with it? People ask me that. What do you mean first class? Did he go in first class? He was a stowaway in first class section? No. 57 years later, when I accompanied him back to Paris to meet the woman he had left behind, I flew him in first class on a DC-10. We were non-rev. We were standby. I was a pilot. I was with the airline, so I got him on first class, of course. So he came to America as a stowaway, and 57 years later, he flew back to Paris in first class, and hence the title. Okay, so that make that a little more clear. So now I'm going to read a little bit more from the book, just to give you a little more idea what the story is about, from chapter 1. So bear with me. It won't take long, but it's important. The turbulence rocked my sleep, though it was completely imaginary. The flight had been exceptionally smooth, but how could I sleep dwelling on how this weekend would play out for my father? How would he explain to Marie why he had just disappeared so long ago? Even though he wrote to her many times after he arrived in America, she never replied to his letters. He assumed she'd moved on, but the uncertainty had always bothered him. Dad had awakened and stared out the window seat into the dawn-colored sky. I doubted he was looking at anything, but I could see his mind was on meeting Marie as well. Would she be waiting for him as she promised? If so, what would Dad say? What could he say? After all, it had been 57 years since he had left her without saying goodbye, and he had not seen or spoken to her since. Recently, they had exchanged letters after he received her address from a mutual friend who had seen Marie while on vacation in France. All they knew of each other was that they had lost their spouses many years before, and my dad wanted to see her. Why she had now graciously agreed to see him, he didn't know. The flight attendant offered us coffee and the usual selection of first-class entrees for breakfast. Dad chose the cheese omelet, but knowing better, I stuck with my usual choice of cereal and fruit. There was not much that the food service department could do to ruin a banana and a box of Cheerios. Are you nervous, Dad? I asked. He turned to me with his gentle smile and shook his head. I was not expecting much more explanation. I'm not nervous about seeing her. I just hope she'll understand why I left. But you explained that to her in a letter after you arrived in America, I said. I did, but I never heard back from her. Maybe she never got it. I heard the hesitation in his voice. He was nervous. In all the years I've witnessed, nothing bothered him. He was a quiet, soft-spoken man of very few words, very typical of the Italian men I've known and read about from the Mezzogiorno, the land of the midday sun, the southern part of Italy, who had immigrated to the U.S. in the early 20th century. He had what the Italians call pazienza. I say it right, pazienza. Patience, for sure. A quiet self-assurance and quiet and control of his emotions. I witnessed that continually in my childhood, especially since my mother was at the opposite end of the spectrum when it came to emotional expression. Like my father, she was kind and loving, but when we did something that upset her, she would not hesitate to let us know in a fiery, hand-waving tirade. This would often be accompanied by Italian words and phrases which I learned were quite colorful and common in Italy, but not suitable for use, everyday use in America, especially not in elementary school. Much of my early Italian vocabulary came from listening to my mom rant and rave. My friends and I laughed along with her many sarcastic expressions in English as well. My father, however, did not typify the stereotypical image of the brash, tough Italian men we all saw on TV or in the movies. His only concern was the well-being of his family, not what others thought of him or how masculine he appeared to his Italian friends. The quiet, determined calmness with which he lived his life reflected that strength of character. Now at 84, he exhibited those qualities even more. The jumbo jet rumbled almost imperceptibly, and the pilot reduced power to begin a gentle descent. Most of the passengers did not even notice the slight change in noise level. I'm a pilot, trained to listen for even the slightest variations in engine noise. I noticed it. It signaled that we were about 30 minutes from landing, close to the moment I had anxiously feared. Dad never had the opportunity to fly with me when I was part of the flight crew, but it thrilled me to be able to accompany him on this trip. It was a chance for me to experience a part of the extraordinary story he had been telling me after all these years. For him, he was adding another chapter, but it would be a chapter unlike the one that started it all. The seatbelt sign illuminated with its accompanying chime. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. We have started our descent for landing at Paris Orly Airport and will be landing soon. Thank you for flying with us today, and we hope you enjoyed your flight. To think that one day I could be making that exact announcement was hard for me to imagine. I was 38 at the time and had been with the airline for only 10 years. Sure, the captains I had flown with had allowed me to make some PA announcements as a co-pilot on our domestic route system, but I was not yet senior enough to fly on our international flights. Announcing our arrival into Buffalo was not the same. It wasn't lost on me that I probably would not be flying at all if it were not for this man sitting next to me and another flight across the Atlantic that had landed in Paris many years before. 59 years earlier, my father stood with about 150,000 other excited spectators at Le Bourget Aerodrome, 7 miles northeast of Paris, anxiously awaiting the arrival of Lucky Lindy in the spirit of St. Louis. Charles Lindbergh had left Long Island in New York the previous day and landed at 10:22 p.m. on May 27, 1927, after 33 and a half hours of flying. According to press reports, the roads leading to Le Bourget that day were crammed with cars, taxis, and buses. It was as though everyone in Paris showed up to watch this historic event. People stood in taxis that had sliding rooftop panels, or the open buses and trolleys, drank wine and champagne and passed bottles to each other in celebration. Floodlights on the ground illuminated the field, and other planes circled the skies over Le Bourget to welcome him. One by one, those planes landed, and after he circled the Eiffel Tower, Lindbergh touched down, the first pilot to successfully complete a solo, non-stop flight across the Atlantic. For the next few days, free food and liquor were given out at establishments all over town, and people partied in the street. Dad vividly described the chaos of that day and told me about the small pictures of Lindbergh that everyone purchased. How could he know that one day I would fly for an airline that would claim Charles Lindbergh as one of its original pilots, and flights across the Atlantic would be commonplace? The feelings that overcame my father as he witnessed that historic event fired in him an enthusiastic interest in flying that he unknowingly passed on to me. He told me the story numerous times, each time as enthusiastically as the time before. His favorite weekend trip, and eventually mine as well, was driving to the local airfield a few miles from our house to watch airplanes take off and land on a grass runway. On many Sundays, instead of going to Fenway Park to watch baseball or to the beach or to visit his paisanos, his friends in the Italian suburbs of Boston, we would spend the afternoon on the outdoor decks overlooking the terminals at Boston's Logan Airport. There were no glass partitions, no security gates, or other restrictions. We were able to just stand there and peer over the wall, gaze at the beautiful planes and the pilots in their impressive uniforms and the well-dressed passengers just a few feet in front of us on the tarmac. As a young boy, I was enamored with the whole experience. Little did I or my father know that my future as a commercial pilot was already in its formative stage. Is there anything else you want to tell me, Dad, before I put this cassette tape recorder away? No, he said, it's the same story that I told you before, nothing new. I had spent an hour with him after takeoff, reviewing what I knew already and preparing him so he could recall it all for Marie. What about Marie? What does she look like? I asked. I don't remember much, he replied with a look of apology. It's been a long time. He did recall that she was shorter than he was, which would have put her less than Dad's modest 5'6" frame. He described her short black hair and her pretty face, which I remember seeing from a group photo of her at Marie's cousin's Philomena's wedding in November of 1928. In the picture, they were standing together, but since she was only 16 and he was 27, it probably was not her father's favorite picture. He did not approve of the relationship. Dad was too old for his daughter. Okay. So that's the wedding picture. That's Philomena there. And that's Marie. And this is my father. Okay, right here. What always struck me in the picture were two things. First, no one was smiling except for maybe one lady in the back row. In the back row next to the accordion player, but even that wasn't much of a smile. The rest of the wedding party and guests had serious looks on their faces, including the bride and groom. It looked more like a funeral than a wedding to me. The other was Dad sporting a large pompadour hairstyle. It was combed into a mound in front, about 3 or 4 inches high and very wavy. When I first saw the picture, I thought it looked funny, although no one else was laughing. That hairstyle was obviously a current trend for men in Paris, but he seemed proud of how it made him look in his fancy suit and bow tie. I remember thinking he must have been a real ladies' man back then, but I've never witnessed that part of him. Even now, he still had lots of hair, gray and thinning in spots, and at his age, it made him look handsome. Dad told me Marie should be waiting for us in the international arrival hall at the bottom of the ramp we would use. But how will we know what she looks like after all these years? I asked. Well, fortunately, he had asked her that in a letter, anticipating their shared apprehension. She said she will be standing with a newspaper tucked under one arm and holding a rose with the other. Dad said she would now be about 73 years old. I kept hoping she would be there. Maybe this would answer whatever questions were still on her mind as well. Why did he leave? Why hadn't he ever come back? Surely she already knew the answers, did she? He couldn't be sure. Had she even read the letters? Did she even care? He was about to get those answers. My silent prayer was that he would not be hurt, but by what he would soon find out. So I was so glad that my dad kept that picture and allowed me to see what he looked like back then. So, okay, now just a few little short passages from chapter 2, and then I will stop and allow you to ask questions. Flight attendants prepare for landing rang out over the PA, and my thoughts returned to what was about to happen to my father. Now even I was nervous. Dad had slept for most of the flight, but when he was awake, he seemed lost in thought, often staring out the window. Other than the daily newspaper, he was not much of a reader. He had taught himself to read and write in English from his native Italian tongue. He could also speak French, which he had learned during the 5 years he lived there. Reading was a struggle for him, and he didn't need a book to entertain himself. He was simply fascinated with the thrill of flying. I watched him for a few seconds and thought about how much I admired this man with a 4th grade education, who had always encouraged me to work hard, do well in school, and get a college education. "You can do much better than me," was a phrase I would often remember him saying very clearly when I found myself struggling to do just that, do much better than he did. Whenever I thought life was getting difficult and thoughts of quitting college played tricks on me, I would think of him and how proud he had been when I received the appointment to the U.S. Air Force Academy. In just one generation, he had experienced life in America as a poor Italian immigrant who had entered the country illegally to now having a son with an opportunity to graduate from a prestigious military academy in his new country. Mom and Dad had saved a few $1,000s toward my college education, but I would need so much more in loans and scholarships to attend any of the schools I had applied to. When his adopted country offered to provide me an education worth over $250,000 at the school of my dreams, he knew he had accomplished what he had set out to do when he left to Italy. Start a new and better life for himself and his future family. The struggles he had gone through to get there would have all been worth it. There was no way I was going to let him down. Get to the end here of this chapter. As we headed into the arrivals terminal, we could see hundreds of people jockeying for position around the exit ramp, anxiously looking for their loved ones to appear. I was glad Dad and Marie had thought of this ahead of time, but even so, it would be difficult to find any particular person in such a large, noisy crowd. Calling out a name wasn't going to work. We weren't even sure she would be there. Dad noticed an older, well-dressed woman standing next to what appeared to be a niece or daughter, both anxiously looking up the ramp. She had short, black hair, but he could not remember her face, since it had certainly changed over the years. It could have been her. Then he noticed the rose. In her right hand, she had a single red rose, and under her left arm was the folded newspaper. It had to be Marie. He pointed her out to me. He waved. Marie waved back. When they made eye contact and realized they were seeing each other for the first time in 57 years, my father's eyes watered, and a big smile appeared on his face. Marie beamed like she was greeting an old friend returning from a long summer vacation. As we walked down the ramp, the relief and emotion affected me as well. I felt tears forming in my eyes. Thank you. I was so happy for my father that so far this trip was working out well. As we continued to walk toward her, my thoughts drifted back to the day when a stranger approached my father in Paris. The day he left, the day his life would change forever, and it would change my destiny as well. That fateful day had started the chain of events that led him back to her today. And you have to read the rest of the story to find out the chain of events. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop right there and allow you to read the rest of the story as I go back to 1929 and describe what happened. It's full of twists and turns, and as Chiro said in his lead up to this, it reads like a thriller. I hope that you two agree with Chiro. One more thing, in the acknowledgement section of the book, I thank a lot of people who assisted me in writing it. But there's one special person I would like to acknowledge publicly. So let me read from the acknowledgement section, and that'll be it, okay? Lastly, but most importantly, this book is a result of the support from my partner for 54 years, my wife, Judy. She loved my father and spent many days caring for him. I cherished her thoughtful reading of each chapter, the many conversations we had about them, and her countless insightful comments, edits, and suggestions, but would have not been written at all without her continual love, her confidence in me, and her persistence in urging me to write it in the first place. It was only when Judy described her idea of the first scene of the book that I finally captured the revelation of what it could be. Without her, I would not have had the vision to write the first page. Ladies and gentlemen, my wife, now 55 years. Stand up. Yeah. My wife, Julie, thank you so much. I'm going to put up my, it's a great picture. It might be. Yeah. There he is. Yeah. Yeah.
Very handsome guy, isn't he?
Okay. Yeah, no, this was later on after he had come to America, but I still cherish the picture. And I'm so glad he left some pictures for me like this. Okay, so I'm not going to answer any questions about what happened to my dad or how he got here or any of that. I'm not going to give away the story, but if you have any questions about how it came to be, I would be glad to. Well, when he got here, it was March 12th, which is, I released the book on March 12th of 1929. And the Depression kind of hit about 6 months later in the U.S. and it started to get worse and worse. But he struggled to find work. He was a common laborer and, pick and shovel guy, which many of you Italian know what that is. And that's how he earned a living. I mean, the tools that we see in the museum, those are the tools my dad used. But he owed a lot of people money, and you'll find out why in the book. So he just couldn't pack up and leave. So he worked hard to try to accumulate enough money to pay those debts back. And about the time he thought he had about enough to pay the debts off, his bank went belly up. He lost it all. So he had to start all over again. So that was my dad's life during the Depression. That was a tough time for him. Yes.
Did he go into the World War II? Was he taught? Did he fight in World?
No, he was not because he was clandestine during the time in the 30s before he met my mother and got married. He was kind of under the radar, so they didn't even know he was here. And by that time, he was too old. So he was too young to be in World War I. He served in the military in Italy. I talk about that in the book. But he was too young to go to war. So he missed both wars, thankfully.
Yeah, good. Back there.
Yes. You had said that there was sort of a quietness about your father, and then at the same time, he's sharing your story with you. Were there times where he didn't want to talk about things, or that there were delicate subjects that were sort of hard to get out of him? And did you push the issue, or?
Actually, that's another good question. My dad loved telling the story to his friends and his paisanos, gathering around the table at night, and I would be in my bedroom. Of course, the bedroom, was a flimsy door, and you could hear everything. So I heard the story over and over again. But he would never pull me aside and tell me, okay, this is how it happened, until I got old enough and I started asking him the questions. And I was trying to draw out the things that I thought would be important. And that's when I decided to videotape him. So if you have any family history and you want to preserve it, get out your video recorder.
How old was he when you recorded him?
He was 82. 82. Yeah, and 2 years later is when we flew to Paris. He was 84. Any more questions? Yes.
How hard was it to find a publisher?
Well, actually, I self-published it because I wasn't going to wait around for 3 or 4 years until somebody decided it was good enough to put out there. So I talked to a publishing company that's a hybrid company they'll either publish the book or they'll help authors like me, independent authors, to publish. They will do everything a publisher would do, except take the book on and wait for the royalties to come in. They expect the royalties up front, so it was a charge. So, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get the book out there. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be around, but I wanted people to see this book. And so I went ahead and had it published that way. So You see references to Girl Friday Productions. They're the publisher of that basically walked me through the whole process. I knew nothing about publishing, as well as I didn't know much about writing either. But they walked me through the whole process, and I had a production manager, and she helped me every step of the way. So it was easy after I hired somebody to help me. Yeah, Bob.
Do you have any disagreements with the editing process?
No, I had my own independent editors. I hired first I had a developmental editor, which I don't know if you know what that is. A developmental editor helps you take a story and develop it into something that's going to be interesting and eliminate the things that aren't applicable to the story, things that aren't going to help move the story forward. So there was this developmental editing phase. And then she decided she was going to have a baby, so I had to get transferred over to a line and copy editor, whom she recommended. Very good, another excellent lady, and she edited, the story, and helped me with the phraseology and the words and the grammar, and then we passed it on to a proofreader. So I had my own independent editors the whole time. So these people that I hired to help me publish the book really didn't have anything to do with the editing. Thank you so much.
As a point of privilege, I'd like to add some concluding remarks, especially as a former immigration attorney for the United States Department of Justice for 40 years. I think that to fully appreciate Gaetano's journey, we have to consider the historical backdrop of immigration to the United States in the 1920s. And some of you, of course, are familiar with that story. After World War I, there was a surge in nativist sentiments and a rise in anti-immigrant attitudes, particularly against Italians, which led to the restrictive quota laws. While the specific legal frameworks have evolved since the 1920s, the fundamental human desires that drive people to leave their homes for a better future remains the same. The courage and resilience shown by Gaetano and thousands of others in facing the challenges of his journey echo in the experiences of countless immigrants who arrive in the U.S. today. Migrants today continue to face huge legal hurdles and delays as they navigate our complex immigration system. Social and cultural adaptations, language barriers, and discrimination remain significant obstacles to integration. Discrimination based on ethnicity, race, and national origin continues to be a reality for many immigrants. Personal stories, such as in Stowaways or First Class, play a vital role in humanizing historical events and complex social issues. These stories connect us with individual experiences on an emotional level. They foster empathy and bridge cultural divides. By sharing these stories, Tony, we can better understand the past and perhaps learn some lessons. In conclusion, we want to extend our deepest gratitude to Tony for sharing his father's remarkable story. Tony's dedication to documenting this personal journey has contributed greatly to our understanding of Italian-American immigration history. Immigrant stories continue to shape and enrich our country. And by embracing our shared history, we can work toward a more welcoming and inclusive future for all newcomers to our nation. We hope our museum can continue to provide a vital space for dialogue and reflection on the history of migration to the Washington, D.C. area and beyond.
I'd like to take this opportunity to, first of all, thank Tony again for his contribution and to announce to the crowd that Tony is giving the museum a check to help us navigate this 501c3 world. we need help, and we really appreciate Tony's contribution. In exchange, we at the museum have a series of lectures that some of you have attended called the Legacy Lectures. We've had 3 so far. One by Luigi Einaudi, who was the grandson of the first Italian president. The second was Vito Tanzi, who was a well-known economist and vice minister in the Berlusconi government in Italy. So he's an American, Italian-American, depends how you want to look at it. Sometimes when he's in Italy, he's an Italian-American. When he's in the U.S., he's an American-Italian. So anyway, so what we have done to express our appreciation to Tony and his desire to honor his father, we've named the series of lectures, the Legacy Lectures, the Gaetano Desantis Italian Legacy Lectures. As we will have one this fall. We will have one this fall. Thank you very much.